There are faces the world refuses to forget, not because they were perfect, but because they made us feel something we couldn't quite name. She was one of them, a woman who stepped into one of the oldest institutions in Britain and somehow made millions of strangers feel less alone. We remember the smile, the careful tilt of the head when she spoke to someone society had learned not to see. We remember the wedding dress, the envy it stirred, the fairy tale we wanted to believe in. But beneath the photographs and the headlines, beneath the tiaras and the charity galas, there was a life lived under a light that never dimmed, never rested, never looked away. She entered that world young, carrying expectations she could not yet measure. The public saw a bride, a symbol, a promise. She stepped into a role that asked for devotion without offering refuge, visibility without safety, admiration without understanding. For years she became the human face of an institution built on distance. She held the hands others avoided. She crossed invisible lines, touching, listening, lingering, where protocol preferred formality. People felt seen around her, perhaps because she herself was always searching to be seen. But attention has a cost. The same cameras that adored her also erased her privacy. The same voices that praised her warmth scrutinized her emotions, her choices, her silences. Nothing was small. Nothing was private. Every misstep became evidence. Every vulnerability, a flaw to be examined. She was loved, and she was questioned. Some called her brave. Others thought her reckless, too open, too willing to disturb traditions that survived by saying little. The truth lived somewhere in between, where most human truths do. Untidy, unresolved, resistant to simple judgment. When she finally spoke in her own voice, she did not sound dramatic. She sounded tired. She spoke of loneliness, of a marriage that had quietly collapsed, of a hunger to matter beyond titles. It was not a performance. It was an act of ownership. And for someone so often defined by others, that mattered. At the center of her private life were her children. She tried to widen their world, to show them lives untouched by ceremony and walls. She wanted them to understand kindness, not as duty, but as instinct. Whether she succeeded fully is impossible to know, but the effort was real. Her life ended before it felt complete. Not in ceremony, but in chaos. The shock that followed revealed something fragile beneath public composure, a collective grief that surprised even those who felt they knew her, only from a distance. Time has passed. Images have been replayed, opinions revised, meanings reattached. She has been remembered as many things: icon, victim, disruptor, saint. None of them fully contain her. What lingers are not answers, but questions. What does it cost to be adored by millions and understood by so few? What happens when compassion becomes visible and visibility becomes a burden? She was more than a symbol. She was a woman trying to survive the space between expectation and self. The world knew her image well. Her inner life, far less so. Perhaps now is the moment to speak to her, not as the figure history fixed in place, but as the person she struggled, quietly and publicly, to remain. There is a strange clarity that comes when you finally stop trying to be understood by everyone. If you have ever felt unseen in a crowded room, then perhaps you have known a small part of me. I have often been described by many things, some kind, some confusing, some entirely imagined. Yet beneath all of it, I was simply a woman learning, slowly and imperfectly, how to exist in a world that watches more closely than it listens. If you are reading this, I hope you are not reading it with sadness, but with a quiet sense of recognition. Life was never meant to be measured only in triumphs or failures. It is measured in the moments where we allowed ourselves to be real, even when it felt uncomfortable. I did not always succeed at that. I tried, sometimes too hard, to be what others needed me to be. I smiled when I was uncertain. I performed when I felt fragile. I mistook attention for care more times than I would like to admit. But I learned slowly that being loved for a performance is a very lonely kind of love. What I came to understand, perhaps later than I wished, is that people do not truly need perfection from one another. They need presence. They need sincerity. They need the quiet reassurance that someone sees them, not as an idea, but as a human being carrying their own invisible history. There were moments in my life where I saw this truth very clearly. Sitting beside someone who believed they had been forgotten by the world, holding a hand that trembled not from weakness, but from exhaustion, I understood something simple and permanent. Dignity lives in being seen. We spend so much of our lives trying to appear strong, but strength, I have learned, is not hardness. It is softness that did not disappear after being tested. I want you to know something that took me many years to accept. Struggle does not mean you have failed at life. Sometimes struggle is the very place where life is asking you to become more honest with yourself. Not better, not stronger, just more honest. There is great peace in that honesty. To those who knew me personally, who saw me beyond the photographs and expectations, thank you for reminding me that I was allowed to be complicated. Thank you for laughing with me when I needed laughter, and for sitting in silence with me when words would have felt unnecessary. To my sons, who will always be the truest part of my heart, you taught me that love is not something you prove once. It is something you practice daily, in patience, in forgiveness, in showing up even when you are tired. I hope you remember that you are allowed to be both strong and gentle. The world often pretends these qualities cannot live together. It is wrong. The strongest people I have known were also the kindest. You will be told many things about who you should be. Listen politely, but listen more closely to the quieter voice inside you. That voice is older than expectation. It knows you better than any crowd ever could. There is something I wish someone had told me when I was younger. You do not have to earn your worth through endurance. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to step back. You are allowed to choose peace, even when the world seems to reward noise. I think often about ordinary moments. Walking somewhere without being watched, laughing without wondering who might be listening, sitting in a room and feeling completely unremarkable. These moments are not small. They are life, in its purest and most honest form. If you have these moments in your life, protect them. They are not wasted time. They are where you remember who you are when no one is asking you to be anything else. I made mistakes. I misunderstood people. I trusted when I should have paused. I doubted when I should have trusted. But mistakes are not evidence that a life was poorly lived. They are evidence that a life was lived at all. Perfection is quiet and empty. Growth is noisy and human. If there is one thing I hope my life might quietly suggest, it is this. Compassion is never wasted, even when it is not returned, even when it is misunderstood, even when it feels small. Kindness changes rooms in ways we do not always see. It softens conversations. It gives permission for honesty. It reminds people that they are not alone inside themselves. I used to believe pain was something to be hidden, something to be managed privately, quickly, politely. I no longer believe that. Pain is often simply proof that something mattered to us, and caring deeply is never something to apologize for. At the same time, I hope you allow joy into your life without hesitation. Joy does not betray seriousness. Joy does not mean you are ignoring the world's suffering. Joy is what allows us to continue being tender in a world that can sometimes feel sharp. I have met people who had very little yet shared everything. And I have met people who had everything, yet felt they had nothing. Peace is not built from possessions or position. It is built from connection. Connection to others. Connection to purpose. Connection to yourself. You will change many times in your life. Do not be afraid of this. The person you were at 20 is not supposed to be the person you are at 50 or 70. Change is not a betrayal of who you were. It is a continuation. If you find yourself becoming softer with age, more patient, more reflective, more forgiving, this is not weakness. This is wisdom, arriving quietly. There is also something important I must say. You do not need to be visible to be valuable. Some of the most meaningful lives are lived quietly, without recognition, without applause. A life measured in how safe others felt around you is a life well lived. When people speak of legacy, they often imagine monuments or grand gestures. But real legacy is much quieter. It lives in the way someone remembers feeling in your presence. It lives in the kindness you offered when it was inconvenient. It lives in the moments you chose understanding instead of judgment. You do not need a platform to leave something meaningful behind. You only need a heart that remains open. If I am remembered at all, I hope it is not for perfection, or tragedy, or myth. I hope it is simply remembered that I tried to be kind in a world that sometimes forgot how necessary kindness is. I have come to believe that love is not something grand or distant. Love is practical. It is patience. It is showing up. It is listening when you would rather speak. It is forgiving when you would rather turn away. Love is also boundaries. Love is knowing when to step back so that you do not lose yourself while trying to save someone else. Be gentle with yourselves. Life is not a test you must pass. It is something you experience, learn from, and contribute to in whatever quiet ways you can. If you are older now and looking back on your life, I hope you are kinder to your younger self than you were at the time. You were doing the best you could with what you knew then. That is all any of us can ever do. I am not afraid. Not because I was always brave, but because I have come to understand that endings and beginnings are often just different names for the same doorway. If there is peace waiting, I welcome it. If there is rest, I am ready for it. If there is simply quiet, that is enough. Hold the people you love close. Say the kind thing when you think it. Allow yourself to be imperfect and still worthy of care. Thank you for seeing me when I was strong. Thank you for seeing me when I was uncertain. Thank you for allowing me to grow in front of you, even when it was messy and unfinished. I have lived, I have loved, I have learned, and truly what more could any heart ask for? With all my love, Diana.